Okay. All right. I think I'm good with the stream. So yeah, I posted the learning report because I figured there's a few good sort of starting points in this.
To do stuff with time limits, you need a good way to organize discussions asynchronously so you can keep going back to it. And because like things like Discord discussions don't work well over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have been thinking a little bit about that with regards to I've sort of got a commenting system that Flux uses that is not it's sort of like half like it's not fully implemented. I'll just bring it up on the screen in a tick. Anyway, so this is like pretty let me just see if I can. Oh, there we go. So yeah, so like this is one of the questions someone had. So it's styled sort of similarly to your thing, but the idea was that I could extend this to be general. Anyway, so this would give me a way of like actually having a like long form discussions asynchronously. That's sort of the idea of what to work towards because there's no really good forums or anything at the moment, I think.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really important, by the way, is a linear view. If you have nested comments, you should have a button to show everything in chronological order, so it's really easy to find the new stuff. Because if you look at
Yep.
like old LessWrong or Reddit threads, it's hard to figure out what needs to continue or what's going on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think both are sort of important in that, like, not having a nested view can make things really hard to follow, but not having a chronological view is like inconvenient and means that you miss stuff. Um, there's maybe some other things as well, but no, both of those are really important. Um, email is sort of not so bad for this, but there are other downsides to it.
Did you see my reply to you, by the way?
Um,
On Carrie just
which
a few minutes ago?
no, I wouldn't have.
Here. It was about the SI stuff, so it's relevant.
When you say none of the discussion, you mean this stuff other than mine or mine included?
I think yours included because you were just replying to them, right?
Yeah, in two of them I've explicitly, or three of them I've explicitly tried to bring it back though. Um,
Oh, okay, I wasn't paying close attention. But
that's right.
yeah,
Um,
it seemed like it was all stuck on technical details, which weren't actually what I was talking about in the first place.
yeah. So,
But yeah, I think their belief is you can sidestep everything I was talking about um, on the theory that all possible ways of using English are simply equivalent to different Turing machines, which strikes me as a claim that needs a lot of explanation and elaboration and analysis to like think it makes any sense. Like,
yeah.
because the standard view of what a Turing machine does and is not similar to English at all. And
Hmm.
so it's not obvious how you encode like all the knowledge of English into your Turing machine. And
Hmm.
like encode like everything people do. Not just into software, because like I agree that it's computable. Whatever we're doing must be computable. Like you could write software that's an AGI. But they're basically saying like encode an AGI in a Turing machine, kind of.
Yep.
Like,
Which I think it's sort
not
of
run it
implicit.
on one, but encode it in the rules of the Turing machine so that it's like trivial or something. So that you just like put like a one, and then boom, you've got an AGI. It was really simple. It only took 1 bit.
So yeah, so let me see if I can. It's on my other machine, but I'm just logging in remotely. I was working on something the other day that I wasn't convinced would actually go anywhere. But the idea was roughly, I wanted to see if you could use like mathematical induction to prove that certain alphabets are unsuitable for SI. Um, uh, anyway, in that like show a trivial case and then show that every operation from there on out produces other forms of that case. Um, anyway, I've just got to bring it up.
Yeah. I find them really unsuitable to talk with about this stuff because none of them actually know details. They all just gesture at the literature non-specifically.
Yeah, I agree. And they don't. The other thing there is that they don't. Uh, like they don't apply the thing in that like even though they're like referring to stuff, they don't like actually make it relevant to the question at hand. So there's lots of guesswork that you need to do to actually figure out why it applies. Um,
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of bridging material. They're like this textbook, and it's like which specific parts doesn't have a direct answer. And they're like, the guy literally told me, well, it's good that it doesn't have a direct answer. You should be happy because you get to read hundreds of pages of great stuff.
yeah, that seems to me the same sort of argument of like, oh, it's good that uh, like what is it? String theory includes like all possible universes as a thing, trillions and trillions and trillions of universes, and now we get to find all this stuff as opposed to like, oh, it tells us a whole bunch of stuff that's not useful, or things like that. Anyway, yeah. So this thing was like, yeah, take a base case and then something trivial like output one if the data matched our theory, like something that's ridiculous, but it works under SI. And then anytime you add anything to the alphabet, if you encode any information in that, then you just end up with a problem of regression where you don't get any benefits really. Like all the work is just pre-done. So this is the same sorts of arguments as like in BOI about like where the knowledge comes from. Um, so yeah, so these like the conclusion roughly being that these alphabets are unsuitable for SI. They don't teach us anything because we've already done the work of creating the knowledge in the construction of the alphabet. But yeah,
Yeah. SI in general and inductivism in general have where does the knowledge come from problems. They don't understand that. They don't understand how much work their prior does. Like, they haven't done any worked examples where things change order. Did you see my FI post about that? Because
no,
the general concept is you have the prior, but it's only the prior, and then you're going to update a lot so the prior's not that big a deal. And no matter what prior you have, you'll converge on the right answer. That's roughly their theory.
hmm,
And so they de-emphasize the prior, but in lots of cases, theories never become reordered. They stay in exactly the same ordering of which ones are better according to the prior, and they stay proportional for how likely they are in the original proportions. And all that
yeah,
happens is essentially some get crossed off the list, some get excluded.
yeah. I have seen people comment that like there's no like there's nothing that prevents a long hypothesis in SI from being like having high probability. Um, but I've never heard of a mechanism that gives it high probability that like does any active rebalancing.
Oh, it gets high probability when you refute every shorter hypothesis because you get enough evidence.
Yep.
Like, I think that's it. Like, I don't think there's any way that it catches up. It can only catch up when you're dealing with theories that make probabilistic predictions. But my theory is that if you're dealing with deterministic physical events, then hypotheses that give deterministic outputs will outcompete ones that give
Mm.
probabilistic outputs when reality is actually deterministic. Like if you're
Yep.
dealing with dice or something, maybe your probabilistic hypothesis is actually ideal, and you'll actually converge sort of like how they want it to work. But if you deal with all the many things that are deterministic, then I think you just don't get theory reordering among deterministic theories, because they always either get refuted by the evidence or they predicted it with 100% confidence, so they don't lose any ground. Because deterministic theories are always either predicting this, the next bit will be a 1 or the next bit will be a 0, and they put all of their probability weight behind one or the other. They always get full credit or get refuted.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think I read that FI post you made. And then there was, I think you included the clever case as well of if you have like 3 theories which have like perfect like probabilistic predictions, by basically enumerating all of the possible things for the first few rolls, then or biasing the things, then you end up with one of the biased theories always outperforming the probabilistic one. Because after the first few, it just turns into the
Yeah, I
old
wasn't
one.
I wasn't sure about that because the math depends on whether you can bias your theory without making it too much longer. Like, can you gain more from biasing it and getting lucky than you lose from the length it takes to add the bias?
Yep, yep. I
So
mean,
it's a math problem, and I don't know the answer.
my intuition is that particularly with Turing machines, because we're working on like a numbers level of emergence sort of thing, then essentially it's just like like read a bit, output a bit, read a bit, output a bit, read a bit, output a bit, and then do the other algorithm. And so that's like what 6 extra instructions max. Um,
Yeah, but
and I
every
don't.
bit halves probability.
Yes, but we have no way to compare those probabilities. Um, because they're non-normalized. So I
Well,
mean,
you
we
can
both
compare
agree
them
with bias.
relatively. But
Mm.
like one is 6 bits worse than another one, so there's a 30 or 64 to 1 ratio on their
Um,
probabilities.
yeah, one of the answers that I thought would come up for the mathematical inconsistency, which I think is actually a way to like show that the maths is not necessarily consistent, is that so we take this, but this is called non-normalized. We know that it adds up to more than one. Each probability in like that series adds up to one. So for any given like length of x, all the
Yeah,
permutations, but in essence, the problem is then we don't know how to combine them. So if you said that like this function p is dependent on the length, so like p sub L of x, then all of the mathematical consistency can like what do you call it? Like this all this logic goes out the window because you can't uh like for example you can't apply, I don't know what to call this, but the usual expansion of like or for independent events. You can't expand this anymore. I mean you can if it's equal, but you can't then do like these steps where you add them together to get things. So it's sort of, I think there's like an exit for them, but that exit then means that they can't make all their other conclusions, which makes sense because the prior is dumb. But yeah.
I didn't entirely follow that, but yeah, you said something about you were surprised they wouldn't say something, but like the math in your post like looks fancy. Do you know what I mean? Like that's hard to follow for most people.
Um, I feel like it's easier to follow than like what do you call it when it's in text like this. Um,
Oh,
or,
I wasn't talking about the formatting. I mean the actual formulas. Like yours look more
oh, okay, yeah.
complicated than mine.
Um, yeah, part of the reason I did this like fancy stuff was I was interested to see what the reaction from like LessWrong people would be. And I noticed
Yeah,
I've got
to ignore
4
it.
upvotes now. Yeah, well, I've got 4 upvotes now, but it took ages to get any upvotes. Like there were none in the first day or something like that.
Cover it.
I think it's 3 votes.
Okay, so there's only 2 people. Because one vote's
Mine
from
doesn't.
you.
I don't think mine counts.
I think it
Um,
does.
there's uh, so it doesn't count for some. Oh no, no. Okay, yeah, no, it does count. Sorry. There's some. It's one of those things. Karma is inconsistent when it comes to like what do you call it? How it adds up. What? Okay. Apparently, I don't exist.
Their website is kind of slow in general. I think they have issues.
Um, yeah, I don't know if it's to
Oh,
do with their database. Like they've got a GraphQL database, and I feel like someone just used it as an excuse to learn GraphQL, and it's ended up a bit inefficient because of that. It's like really bad though. This is awfully slow.
Yeah, no, there was a time when it was just not loading and I just gave up for hours. There's a lot of times when it just takes 10 seconds to load a page for no reason.
Yeah, I don't
And
know
they have
why this,
they have a budget and a team.
which I think is pretty ridiculous.
Like if you're trying to put money into being popular and influential and stuff, website loading speed matters. Like that's a well-known standard thing that companies care about.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, the website's just broken right now. So, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, the SI stuff. Anyways, what I was saying is I thought my math was too advanced for them. Literally none of them engaged with it in any way. So I was not expecting them to engage with your math.
Mhm.
Most people don't math. Even the people who talk like they math and pretend to math, they mostly don't.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't expect anyone to really engage with it either. I was sort of hoping that someone would, but yeah. But no, I
Yeah,
agree.
most of the
People, yeah,
people who
don't.
can math like think they're too important for public forums or something.
They've got to go spend their time typing up LaTeX and publishing papers in Arxiv.
Yeah. They try to go talk to the other people they think can math.
Well, to be fair, if you are interested in doing maths, then spending time talking to people who can't do maths is probably a bad use of time. It's just it's unfortunate they apply it sort of heavy-handedly to all public or not all public discussions, but like discussion stuff in general.
Yeah, I don't think that they actually get good discussions in their academic circles either.
No, I agree.
But I don't think it works out that well.
But yeah, so yeah, going back a bit, we were what were we? It was the long-term debate stuff, right, that we were talking about first. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if yeah,
right. So if you want to do that stuff for Flux or whatever, um, yeah, you need a forum that is suitable for asynchronous discussion over time
yeah,
and
um,
keeping you need to be able to like keep track of which ones are open and what's going on with them.
yeah. I guess I'm in like thinking about this. I
Actually,
don't.
you
Oh yeah.
probably don't. My experience with this stuff is literally no one wants to do it, so you'll just never get inquiries.
Um, I think sort of similar to what what I remember your views as on this. I feel like it's important in many ways for the occasional and rare person who comes along that like is a high quality thinker. Um,
Yeah, I think it's good to have something like so it's possible to get started. But I don't think you need to like set everything up. Like you can do it in
oh
a
yeah,
just-in-time way.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
if you actually need it, you could set more stuff up.
yeah. I agree with that. I don't think like making a sophisticated system upfront is a good use of time. Um, not like even if I don't have comments, like I can start writing stuff before like having a way to discuss it, like native to the site or whatever else. Because there's other places to have that discussion. Um, but yeah, but no, I agree with just in time for it. But long term wise, if these projects are going to be enduring and the discussions are going to happen over many years, not like necessarily a single discussion, but like the pattern is
Yeah.
enduring, then I will need something like this eventually.
I think a lot of how well this stuff works depends on how well you can discuss and be reasonable yourself. Like, having policies that you have to follow helps, but if you say dumb stuff, people will probably just be like, you're dumb, I give up. Or if it seems unfair or various things. It's also like pretty easy to not follow your own policies and then people call you out for it and leave. So that's a bad outcome.
Yeah. I think that's like a soluble problem though, in this like a just-in-time sort of soluble problem in that provided I don't keep making the same mistakes, then like anytime I don't follow my own policies, if someone can point that out and I like do a post-mortem and whatever else, then I think that's like an acceptable way to deal with it, as opposed to aiming for like 100% compliance from day one.
Yeah, if it's clear that there's a ongoing process, that could be reasonable.
I do have a thing in here as well about like having a draft first and have the proviso that it could change unpredictably. Um,
Yeah,
so I think that's like a good way to deal with it to start with, because I'm not going to be able to, like, that's the other thing. I'm not going to have like a good debate policy from day one either, or all of those policies. They're fallible too.
as far as reading habit, are there things you do regularly that you could multitask reading with, like exercise?
So I've like audiobook wise, I listen to like some podcasts a reasonable amount. Well, I mean, not so much anymore, that I'm not like commuting anywhere. There are definitely some things, where I'll either like I use Audible occasionally, or like have stuff running on a computer while I'm doing stuff around the house or things like that. Uh, I guess in some ways I'm like interested in having like better reading habits, like where I'm, actually reading text as opposed to listening to it, because like listening is fairly easy. I've sort of resisted. Um, I mean, I guess on the one hand, it's better to like listen than do nothing. Um, but I prefer to have like a stronger habit about like actually like, reading stuff, like
Yeah,
on Kindle or whatever. Like, yeah,
I think listening is a easier way to get started, and you can do that regularly and then add on the slower, more focused reading later. And I also think listening is fairly effort efficient, which is a benefit. So what you can do is listen to a bunch of books and then take the most important ones and do a second reading visually. That way you don't waste your visual readings on bad books.
yeah,
And you'll get to read a lot more books than if you were only reading visually.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, having a rough understanding of books is a big difference than none.
yeah, yeah. Um, Even if it's just like listening to 10% of the book to decide whether I wanted to read the rest and then reading it in text. There's lots of ways to apply that. One of the things as well that sort of occurs to me is just often like starting at all is part of the problem. And so I don't want to set a barrier that's too high for myself so that I keep like avoiding this or like not doing it. And that if I can, yeah, have any habit, then that's better than having no habit. Um, and that might actually be then a catalyst to get me to read the other stuff, like the stuff that's more interesting, like more thoroughly. Um, yeah,
Yeah, you'll be more motivated to read something visually if you recently read it in audio and thought it was really good but you didn't follow it enough. Like, you'll actually sometimes notice gaps because you're not fully focused in audio, that you want to read that specific part and you see why it would be useful.
yeah. I find I get those gaps regardless of whether I'm like listening or reading. Like even I mean, fiction or otherwise, just what do you call it? Like yeah, mind goes wandering or thinking about something, and you realize you haven't paid attention the past few minutes.
Oh, yeah. When I do that with visual reading, I usually just go back.
Yeah. It's much
With
easier usually.
audio, it's pretty easy to like not fully follow an argument, even if you didn't space out.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. It's much harder to hold it all in your head, and you can't like seek like different parts of the argument easily. Like with text, you could, pick out, like odd words or whatever else, quite easily. Whereas with audio, you can't really do that. You've just got to hold it all in your head.
Yeah, it helps to pause occasionally on audio if you need to think for a bit. And
Yeah,
also, I think perfectionism is a common problem that gets in the way of reading. I think that's part of what you were talking about earlier, where if you set their standards too high, then it gets in the way of starting at all.
yeah,
So, like, needing to do it visually and needing to be in a, like, focused mindset where you're not too mentally tired and stuff and in a good mood. Like, all of that means doing it less often.
yep,
And yeah, I think it's really important to have resilient skills where if you actually want to be good at something, that you can do it in bad circumstances while you're tired, while you're distracted, while you're cold, while you're hungry, whatever. That comes up with like athletes or esports people. They often have to compete in non-ideal circumstances and they need to be able to deal with that.
yep, yep. Um, yeah. Also, like soldiers, in terms of like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're, bending over, throwing up. You still need to be able to fight.
Yeah, so it's part of the issue of how people learn things and they think they've learned it and they're good at it and it's too early and they have more to do. Like if you haven't gone to the resilient point yet, that's not mastery.
Mm. Yep, much agreed.
Yeah, about the SI stuff, are there other topics you want to talk about? Like you could just pick other ones on purpose and bring them up somewhere.
Um, yeah. Oh, well, this sort of relates to this idea that I've got down the bottom, which I didn't feel like confident enough about, and I sort of like got like I wrote a little bit about that at the end of the email, but in essence, I was the like this is was essentially to like as material for some of the future tutorials, um, to like find topics on like that you've listed in your debate topics, and like potentially discuss those. Particularly because that's one of the ways to practice like a discussion where both of us can like be sure that there's like a long term commitment to it as opposed to less wrong stuff. Um, I don't feel particularly confident necessarily about this idea, but I think it can be used to sort of figure out things to do next anyway. Um, like like moving towards some like a position where I would be able to do this is a decent goal regardless. But yeah, but maybe that relates to some of the other topics other than SI, because there are other things that I'm interested in. Oh, sorry, excuse me. It's just that this is a bit this is SI is just topical at the moment as such.
Yeah. When you say to ET, do you mean like to FI or to me personally? I just
No,
found
I
it.
drafted it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I drafted it to you personally. I
Oh,
mentioned at the
okay.
bottom that I don't have any issue discussing it, but I sort of figured like I
Oh, I
could
see.
post it towards like like um like an FI, but I figured that like, or at least the frame that I wrote it from was like to you, which I think makes more sense. Whereas if it was like to FI, it would be more about like, is this a good idea sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, I was just wondering because now it's in public. Yeah, Bitcoin is a bit of a difficult topic because it deals with a lot of specific facts. It's like less about principles than some other topics. Although often discussions end up about principles pretty much no matter where you start.
hmm. um, yeah, I think like with a lot of the Bitcoin slash blockchain stuff, there are a lot of principle based arguments that I'd use, particularly like as the ecosystems like developed and I've like learnt more and been exposed to more and more things people have tried, I think the best ways to like differentiate them is to like do it from a first principle sort of point of view, as in just because there's so much crap around, and crap stuff doesn't line up with the principle. So like Bitcoin is actually like principled in ways that like lots of other blockchains aren't, or lots of other blockchain projects aren't. Um,
So right, but see, my also my criticisms are not like digital currency is theoretically bad or anything like that. Like it's not that kind of principle. It's the actual things people are making, the actual communities and businesses and activities are broadly, terrible.
yeah. So in thinking about how we might have like started one of these discussions, like I imagine that first off, like I mean, I'd write something about my sort of like positions or ideas and ask clarifying questions on yours, but I feel like it could actually be a discussion that ends up being quite short in that like any apparent disagreement is basically just like waiting on the framing that we're sort of coming from. Um, in that yeah, like I mean, I agree that I mean there's like more than like 5,000 things listed on CoinMarketCap, I think, at the moment. So most of them are like blockchains or like tokens. Um, and I agree that most of them are crap. They're just utter crap. They're like either get rich quick schemes or just stupid things people are building, flawed things, whatever. But the technology I think is important. And so it might be that we actually don't really have a disagreement in those sort of things, or not a substantial one at least.
Maybe some of the technology is important. My understanding of Bitcoin specifically, as a payments mechanism, is that it has major flaws and isn't really serious, like the actual implementation of how it works.
So, I mean, in terms of the implementation, there's like what we got to start with, and I think there's a fair amount of leeway we should give there because it's literally like the first thing that was trying to do this. Like nothing was particularly better in terms of payments, cryptographic payments before that. Like a small Bitcoin transaction is only like 220 bytes, something like that. Um, a lot of the limits that it has, like 7 transactions a second or 4 transactions a second, are artificial in that there's just a hard-coded like limit on the amount of traffic that the network is going to have as throughput. Um, so it's sort of like there's an arbitrary element there. But there are like some serious engineering efforts to try and come up with ways around that. Um, yeah, which is like yeah, much more sophisticated than just like the basic Bitcoin system. Not that they've taken off particularly, but they've been around for a few years. The other thing is the problem that Bitcoin was trying to solve was not to be PayPal. Like I think fundamentally it was about having an alternate type of money, essentially.
Right.
So
And
that might,
then but it's not valued that way. Like the price of Bitcoin is not
mm,
how useful is it to have libertarian currency or whatever.
I,
Um, most of the money
yeah,
that is poured in is for other reasons that
yes,
are problematic.
yeah. I think you have problems with speculation on any publicly tradable asset, though, potentially. Um,
But Bitcoin is like heavy on that while having like a low amount of use case. As opposed to like Apple. The ratio of like investing in this company sells things that make money versus speculation is uh quite different.
yeah. One reason that I'm not, or that like that I have an issue with that is, uh, like, so Bitcoin, like if we say that like Bitcoin has some use value that isn't possible to replicate through like normal money, there's some way to use it that you can't use regular money for. Um, so like when WikiLeaks was deplatformed uh, in like 2013 or whatever, and couldn't take credit card payments, they still took Bitcoin transactions for donations, uh, or 20 earlier, in 2013. Uh, so like the value of that in sort of an absolute sense of like, is it something that we want to exist at all? I think is like something that we can argue from principles, as opposed to like relative to like it's something that's valuable regardless of like comparisons. But I agree that the like value of Bitcoin, which is what $10,200 at the moment, is largely speculative. I don't think Bitcoin has any long-term value besides being the first blockchain, which is mostly like, a historical thing. It's not that Bitcoin is going to be what we end up basing crazy new protocols on in the future.
Right, right. Even if the use case is very important in the long run, that doesn't mean Bitcoin will have long-term value.
Hmm. One reason I think Bitcoin has value is that people see it as like exposing themselves to like the blockchain ecosystem in general, but without picking like particular horses or particular projects sort of thing. So they don't need to, invest in all this crap. They can like just speculate via this one asset, and presumably they think they'll be able to like, move value out before Bitcoin gets like totally superseded. But the other reason I think it might have value is just because, like in a relative sense, it's been incredibly reliable and it's incredibly conservative, far more so than any other project. There's value in that, in the same way that there's like value in tradition or in conservatism regarding like changing rules of governance or laws. And so I can sort of see other reasons that people would want to hold it as well as opposed to holding other cryptocurrencies.
It would depend how you define reliable, because a lot of people have lost their money.
Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that like the things that Apple do get better and worse based on Apple's stock price though. So I'd sort of say that like
I
Bitcoin
didn't
doesn't
mean
get.
losing their money due to the price of Bitcoin going down. I meant losing their money because
Oh,
they lost their wallet, or they got hacked, or the exchange they were using got hacked, or the exchange they were using was a fraud the entire time. All
yeah.
those use cases are, in some important sense, make it much less reliable than the regular banking system. And the
Um,
inability to reverse transactions um gets people defrauded, and shit happens. It's
there
very
are
unsafe in certain ways.
um, yes. I mean, I don't think any of those arguments are like fundamentally like a uh. So there's analogies for all those things with cash as well. Uh, there are,
Yeah.
ways of making, USD transactions that aren't reversible. Like if I just give you $100 note, um, stuff like that. But I agree that we don't have good like software support. Like the user experience is really bad, and there's sort of this stupid excuse of like, well, you're on the frontier or whatever else, and it's just your responsibility. And I agree that we can like do more there. In fact, I think it's a major failing of the blockchain ecosystem and new projects that don't prioritize those sort of safety measures high enough. Um,
Yeah.
and
It
which
doesn't
is
make sense for the price to be so high while also saying it's a frontier, that's why everything's awful. Like, if that much money is going to be poured into it, stuff should be getting fixed.
part of the other problem there is that incentive structures are such that the system can continue um, without without providing more of those things. Like there's no one's like paid by Bitcoin to like work on stuff unless there's like a foundation with donations or something like that. The protocol itself isn't self like what do you say, like self-funding slash like self-developing is probably better. Some other like chains have tried to do stuff like that, but I don't think it's worked out particularly well. Most of the stuff that you see that's like either new and high value, like people have already acquired like a lot of money and like have started a company around stuff or whatever else. But yeah, there is
Okay,
a
so
general. Yep.
you can go.
Oh, I was just going to say there is a general trend towards like better stuff like this, but with like the ecosystem is fractured so that it's not usable across everything. And it's been really slow relative to the like price rise. It's inefficient in doing that.
Right. Okay. So backing up, you were saying possibly skip next session, and you have this idea about things to do. So we should probably take stock of where we're at and where we're going. and what things would be useful to do.
Yep.
I do think it's
But
possible to do sessions without you doing homework, but it depends what our goals are, what we want to do.
yep. So I guess for context for anyone watching, so because at the end of the last session we talked about doing 3 sessions this week, and before the session I messaged you saying we might need to cancel the middle one, just from work volume. I mentioned as well that I'm like potentially okay keeping it. It's just the doing stuff in between that's an issue. I agree that we can do stuff between, like we don't need homework for that I need to do before the next thing or things like that, etc. So the only other thing I wanted to mention re goals and stuff is that like I thought one of the good things about this email draft that I wrote was that like if there are significant issues that I'd run into like doing something like this, then like that gives us a list of stuff to focus on next, essentially, or a list of possible stuff to possibly focus on next. But yeah, so the other thing is that it's probably fair to say that like if we're potentially skipping the midweek session now, that's probably going to continue. So I mean, maybe doesn't make a huge difference in the scheme of things, but maybe that's significant.
Yeah. Okay. So for this stuff, having a debate, you mentioned like both of us streaming it. A different way to do it is I can read and write short replies very quickly off stream. It's a bit hard to time keep if you're doing a lot of little things, but can like estimate that and just do that asynchronously whenever.
Oh yeah, so as in like it's sort of like over 4 hours type thing, but you're like 50% applied. That sort of idea to end up at 2 hours. That's roughly what I thought you meant.
Oh no, I mean like just any random time of day,
Mm.
like spend 10 minutes and write another reply and several times a day if you keep responding or whatever, rather than
Yeah,
in
okay.
like a set time window.
Yep. That's possible too. I guess it depends. Like, I mean, one of the reasons I mentioned the streaming stuff was that I thought that it would maybe be like a good example in that. So, a lot of your replies to Gigahertz are streamed, but I don't think Gigahertz streaming the other side. And so having like seeing both sides might either provide good content or like make obvious different ways of thinking about the same thing. Like, yeah, I'm not sure if
Yeah,
that would really be that valuable because I'm not sure. Yeah,
it
my side
depends
would be.
significantly on my reply length. If I write a lot of really short things, then I'm only doing like small chunks of time, so it's harder to do videos or anything like that. Whereas if I'm writing like long, elaborate replies, it's easy to make a video and talk for a while and stuff. Um,
Yep.
so both conversation styles are possible, but my initial thought was very short chunks might work better on my end.
Yep. My intuition, by the way, is that there would be stuff that would be good for me to work on before we did this. So I think we can like take time thinking about this if we want to do it as well. Um, One thing that occurs to me with regards to like shorter stuff or like more ad hoc and making a video, it might be easier to do that sort of thing if you had an easy way in like OBS to pause and like start and stop recording. Like they've got I'm pretty sure there's a way to pause the recording. Oh wait, no, I can't because I've got the encoder set up wrong. But if you have the encoder set up so that it's different from
Oh, I have a pause button on mine right now. Yeah. I also can pause in ScreenFlow and other things. It's also easy to stitch things together, but there are other issues like whenever I stream, I swap my swap monitors. but
Yeah.
my side screen on my main screen so that there aren't privacy problems on the one I'm streaming, and there's like setup stuff.
Yeah. No,
Not
fair
just
enough.
leave it that way all the time.
Yeah. It's also like a mix and match of both would work as well, I imagine. In that not everything needs to be streamed necessarily.
Yeah, yeah, it's possible to just go over chunked or batched stuff.
Um, yeah,
It's also
yeah,
possible to
current
use spaces as a for very short things and disable notifications. There are other options.
yeah. Um, yeah, my worry about doing something like this was that would be that I'd run into issues that like would essentially like solving them would derail the conversation sort of thing, or like would take a bunch of time and then come back or whatever else, and that it seems like it'd just be better to fix those up front if possible. It's part of the reason that I've like been trying to be responsive on the recent LessWrong stuff, so that there's like the best chance possible of having like an ongoing discussion as a bit of practice.
Yeah, so having a discussion and running into issues is one of the ways to find issues and prioritize them, and it gives you a context to work on them in and a goal, like work on this issue enough to move the conversation forward. But there are definitely other ways to find things to work on. So if you already have a queue of things you want to do that you found other ways, then you don't need to get them this way. But if sometimes people like don't know what their problems are or what they should do next, and then discussion can help figure that out.
Yep, yep, I agree with that in general. And in fact, that I mean, there are limits to how much you can guess up front, so you sort of need to do that at some point. I guess my prediction is that I'm not at that point yet. Yeah, did I say anything? No, I think I've sort of just got these like hints of like issues with discussion stuff. I'm not sure if there's like any problems that I'm continuing to make that I like that I'm not making progress on that we've talked about.
Well, this one, for example, it looks a bit long, as opposed to minimum viable product.
Yep. Um, yeah, I'm not too opposed to like being a bit longer than necessary, partially because I think I'm getting better at staying on focus. Like two things that I think I'm improving is actually reading and understanding what the person's saying. So not
Uh-huh.
just responding to what I interpret it as, and
It,
like being more directed in the arguments. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, if you get good at that, you're gonna notice the other people aren't doing it very much, and it's it's hard to have conversations when you realize that the other people are always talking past you or forgetting what the topic was and stuff.
Yep. Yeah. In this question for example, it took me like a few times reading it to actually get what you meant. I think in that I think I had like a simpler or like a slight misinterpretation of the question to start with. Um, yeah. So even that, which I, read beforehand, but then replying to where was it? So here, so this is like one of the first, or the first like second level reply that I made. And yeah, writing this was it sort of like challenged me a little bit in that I had to go back a few times and like check it against the thing. But I think this is possibly the first time that I've done something like this, and I made sure to do it early as well. So I think those things are getting better, even if it is like there is like a fair sort of length here. I'm not sure if that's part of the less wrong game or not, in terms of like a short replies seen more poorly than longer replies, and that I mean I guess
Yeah,
There's an
I
upper
think a
limit to
lot
that.
of communities are hostile to writing lots of short replies and having very short back and forths, but I think that they generally work better.
Mm. Well, definitely the LessWrong user interface doesn't act well after a few times of doing it.
Yeah. Right. People have like an sort of an implied nesting limit in their heads anyways, where they're like, well, we've gone back and forth 7 times each. That's got to be like a long discussion. I think they apply that even if every message is one sentence.
Mm. Yeah. Um, One thing I noticed about this, by the way, just because it's up on screen, so I like explicitly asked whether that lined up with what this guy thought um, about the original post, and he didn't answer that question.
Yeah, they also didn't answer my explicit questions. Even though it's
Yeah,
like literally a question post and they're submitting their things as answers, not comments, but none of them actually answered my literal questions.
I made sure to. I'm not sure if I replied personally first or I think I did 2 replies to other people first. But I made sure to, yeah, the first 2 sentences I wanted to actually try and answer the explicit stuff, and then further down
Oh.
here.
Yeah, well,
Um,
your answer though was like, I don't know, you might be right, they might not correspond. Like it wasn't an answer why they would.
no, yeah. No, I know my answer is like, I mean, it's not a typical less wrong answer. I did want like there to be like an actual answer to the question though. Like I think it's important that there is an answer there, even if all the other posts didn't have an answer. Even if my answer was like totally wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about.
Although,
Um,
but my questions actually asked for literature. I don't think you were giving literature.
um, I didn't give literature, but I did um like
Oh, yeah, you
answer the
got to
question.
that part later. Okay.
Yeah. I sort of tried to answer the title question first, before other stuff in the actual post.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. Um, but no, my answer is actually it's actually like a little bit anti-SI at the end, which I wasn't sure if that would be an issue. Um, oh yeah, this was around the time that I was trying to make the induction thing. But yeah. So
Okay. So,
yep.
looking back at all of the tutorials, what do you think has worked particularly well? What has worked less well? What do you think you need more practice on? What's your overall perspective on how it's going, etc.?
Um, um, hmm. Just to two birds, one stone. I might take a bathroom break and think about this for a minute. I've got some ideas, but I want to think about it just a little bit more.
Okay.
I'll be back in a sec.
Part of what we've done, I think, is go through some things fairly quickly with the idea that you could practice them more on your own. And I don't know how much that has happened or worked, or if we should like redo some of the things we were doing earlier just so you get more practice during tutorial sessions.
Um, yeah, okay. We can, yeah, expand on that. Part of my thinking is like tutorial sessions themselves are not a great time to do most practice. They're a good time to do like early practice, for example, because that's where like yeah, lots of errors get made and error correction has more utility. Um, but
Yeah.
in general, yeah. Anyway, I'll be back in a minute and we can keep talking.
Okay.
Okay. So one good thing about like moving around is yeah, not getting stuck. I feel like we've done a reasonable good job of that. I think like one of the things that occurs to me about like I guess like my own learning process and these tutorials. So I think you've said in some of your articles on learning that there's like roughly like 3 stages.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like give up at 2 or try and do 3 without doing 2 and stuff like that. I feel like we get over the first one and then sometimes do like uh so like the way we've like dealt with some of the trickier stuff I think has been good. In the like the discussions on the word that. So that's sort of been good, and I think it only makes sense for me to do a lot of the like second and third level stuff myself, partially because otherwise, like, how do I continue to improve or continue to like do these things after like in a month or 2 from now? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of the topics and activities we've done as demonstrations of how you can learn things and practice things that you would hopefully be able to reuse in the future, rather
yes.
than trying to achieve mastery during the sessions. So the result has been going over some things like a bit quickly compared to mastery, but hopefully that's useful.
Yes, I think it is. The other thing that I think is good about that, um, so is like the general. So like Anne made a comment the other day, I think in response to a FI post you made about the videos, or like looking for feedback on stuff generally. Um, and she mentioned that like if your goal was to like teach myself an internet rules like of grammar to, I guess, like the level 2 sort of stage, but not the level 3 sort of stage, then we've succeeded. Um, I think like having the breadth of knowledge is really important to be able to like get to the point where people or like where I know where to go if I want more stuff, if I want to like get better at something. um
Yeah.
if I was like, for example, trying to do like a linguistics program to analyze grammar, I might be able to like sketch something at the moment, but I definitely need to go research stuff before getting like deep into it. But I have like broad enough knowledge to know where to start on that now without doing like an incredible amount of planning. So I think that element has worked really well. I don't think it makes sense to try and get people to the mastery point unless they're particularly interested in getting there. And one of the ways that you can like do that through, well, actually, I'm not sure about this, but I'll say it anyway. What I was going to say was one of the ways you could do that is like as you become more and more skilled in an area, you get all of these other like subtopics and stuff branching off. Like people do university degrees on essentially grammar. Um, so the set of topics to talk about like also expands as you learn more about it. The reason I sort of couched that at the beginning, like was uncertain of it, was like moving on too quickly and then basing stuff on skills that you haven't mastered, or skills that you haven't practiced enough to be able to go further. Not sure exactly how much that would play with grammar, but yeah. Anyway, I think that's worked well. Things that have worked less
Okay.
well, I'm not sure anything's. Oh, yep, sorry.
I was just noting down some of the things we've worked on. Some of which were meant to be like reusable things like brainstorming that or the short writing sessions that you could practice more on your own at any time. Um,
Yep. That's actually something I should probably add it to my learning thing. Something that I'm not happy about is like yeah, like I find when I'm replying to people, like I think my replies are getting better, in general, but I'm not using some of the techniques that we've practiced. And I haven't like gotten good enough at them to do them on autopilot. So maybe a little bit that they help, or like a bit that they help, but they're definitely not. There's still benefits to doing them explicitly. Yeah. One of the things, actually, just thinking about it, like representing ideas as trees, I feel like there's maybe a little bit more sort of like theoretical work to do on how that sort of works. And I feel like a bit is still implicit. Like I know Justin's had a little bit of trouble with some of the ways that we organize them, and I had trouble at the beginning. Yeah, that's sort of like just a general comment. But yeah, really valuable stuff to do though. So
Yeah, one of the things that we haven't talked about is how to do trees for debates in a yes-no way, where you try to use decisive arguments and you can mark issues as resolved. Like, people in a debate can agree that a particular argument is correct, and then you can refute the parent, and you can look at chain reactions in the tree and the current status and so on.
yeah, oh no, we did one discussion of one of mine ones from LessWrong. I have thought about this a bit. I've seen something somewhat similar where like because of the way the topics are structured, like as in there's some disagreement and then there's like these two broad topics and then one of those can sort of end up getting resolved, but it's not like yes, no through the whole thing. It's just a thing that occasionally happens normally.
Yes, so one of the things you can do is you can mark nodes for which ones are intended to be decisive criticisms, and everything else like doesn't need to be answered. It's sort of just commentary. Like, 'cause I think it's fine to have stuff in a discussion that isn't decisive arguments. You can make meta comments, you can explain your thinking, like you can do all kinds of stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. You just need to be very clear about which things are meant to be an argument that refutes something and which things aren't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, even stuff like there's occasionally, I'm not sure in general if this stuff sort of exists or whether it's a bit of an illusion, but sometimes it feels like there's multiple reasons for arguing in favor of something. And like the end goal is what you want to end up with, but there's different ways of getting there. And all of the ways, like none of them are like outright refuted, but they sort of feel soft or whatever else. But people generally agree on the conclusion. Yeah, I'm not sure particularly where I was going with that. Um,
Yeah, I think people look at that stuff a lot, and the reason things are soft, the biggest problem, is that the goal is not defined well enough. If you make the goal really clear with success and failure criteria that's easy to evaluate, it becomes much, much easier to take a potential solution and say, does it meet these criteria or not?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think a lot of softness is that they have ambiguous goals. They have in mind sort of like a range of many goals, and that their theory like probably solves some of them and not others, and they're it's all a bit vague.
Yeah. I agree. And it's a good way to fool yourself by thinking that you've sort of covered a complete spectrum where in fact you've only covered half of it, sort of each half once with mutually exclusive arguments. I feel like that's a somewhat common thing people do. Okay, so I'm just sort of thinking I might have just like a list of future ideas type stuff here so that we can come back to them, record them. Because I think this might be good to do. There's maybe some synergy with other stuff. But yeah, so okay, so in terms of stuff that's worked well, in general, I don't feel like any of the things that you've put up there have been like particular, like nothing's worked badly about them, sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
So I think each of our sort of when we spend time on those topics, they've all been good and useful. In terms of stuff that hasn't worked well, so there's a lot of stuff that I'd like maybe add to this sort of list or would have added and wouldn't anymore. So there's sort of like caveats on them type thing. But in terms of the problems that I've sort of like run into, so there was like yeah, I'm not sure how else to sort of put it, but there's like a lot of there was a lot of like coming to terms with things, sort of like coming to terms, sort of thing, which I think is one should generally expect from doing this sort of thing. So curiously, this reminds me of one of the ideas that I've talked to Mum about occasionally, particularly because like she works as a lawyer in a small town, so that it's she deals with a wide range of people, sort of thing. And a few years ago, I think I put the idea to her that people only practice rational thinking in certain areas. It's like when people say stuff like you go to university to learn how to think. Really, what happens is you learn to think about one thing. You don't learn to generalize that across everything. And I thought I was somewhat better than people at doing that. And anyway, this whole thing and the emotional conflicts that I've run into, I think, demonstrated that I wasn't that good at it. Which is good though, because it means that I'm like better now, or like improving, rather than like,
Uh-huh.
done. So this is not like something that worked badly. I actually feel like I probably dealt with this fairly well in that I didn't take more than a few days each time to sort of get over things to the point of being able to move forward. Some of it was sort of like unpleasant, but I think on the whole it was good. So that's sort of, I mean, yeah, there's sort of like I don't know, yeah, like
Yeah,
a flag sort of
I
thing.
think we spent a whole week talking about that once.
Yeah, that was like the broader general motivation, and
Yeah.
yeah, all that sort of avoidance and stuff, which came after the first two instances of this. But that like related to burnout as well. I think that's actually another thing, like the emotional conflicts, just having like emotional tension that you keep like in the front of your mind when you're trying to like in mind and you're trying to solve it is like a really draining thing. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe like energy management in general is something to sort of that didn't work particularly well, but I don't think it was too bad because I had the bandwidth to deal with it, um, which has sort of been good. Um, there's
Yeah.
some.
Has
Oh
that
yeah,
worked well for you, thinking about different resources like mental energy, physical energy, um listening focus versus visual reading focus, and like trying to manage how much you use per day, that kind of stuff that we talked about?
yeah.
Have you followed up
It
on it?
it has like helped. It sort of expanded and made more detailed stuff that I'd like. I think it was roughly compatible with what I was thinking before. It's
Uh-huh.
just improved it a lot. I'm finding like now that and maybe this is part of the problem of like ending up in a cycle where like burnout happens every 6 or 12 months. Um, is that like now I'm not thinking about it that much. I've sort of like thought about it a bit in that sometimes I'll particularly like take breaks when I wouldn't maybe otherwise. But I generally find that I follow like a if I want to do a thing, then I'm doing it sort of thing. And I think it's good for people to be in a position where the stuff that they want to do um, is stuff that like aligns with their long-term goals and things, or um, is useful as opposed to having a big clash there. But the lack of curation that I put into my own time then persists the cycle to a degree. So I'm not sure how it'll work out in the long run, but it's something that I do need to keep a bit of an eye on. I guess similar to the like we call it the learning thing, the like not using skills like the brainstorming is sort of the same in that it's hard to once I get like unstuck on something, it's hard to try and keep doing a lot of stuff in parallel to a point of mastery, which means that I am not using some of the skills that I've like developed or been exposed to. Maybe that's something that's not working too well, but I don't think there's really a way around that. And I mean, I noticed doing that in other things as well, just like in life in general, that there are things that I like relearn occasionally, because I've like just forgotten to do them, but they're good. So stuff with like maths is not a bad example because it's easy to, the last time you did, a particular type of integration was 10 years ago, then you probably need a refresher, and there'll be elements of that come back about those sort of things, patterns and good stuff to do.
Yeah, one of the
So
things that could help is if you think about what your goals are for what you want to do today, when you wake up, and then every 4 hours maybe, you can set like an alarm and just double check if you're doing what you plan to do or if you're getting off track, and yeah, just make confirm that you're working on what you want to be working on, and like, are you forgetting anything on your to-do list? And if you do that kind of thing regularly, it'll help your actions align with your explicit goals better
yep,
and get more habitual.
yep. Yeah, no, I haven't. This is one of those things where I've like it was I think a week ago or so. I was talking to a friend about him managing like work recreation balance, and particularly stuff like if he has a beer after work or has a beer in the afternoon, and then not being like useful afterwards, like or then avoiding like housework and stuff because he's in his relaxing phase. Um, anyway, and his initial idea was put a time thing on it, and I suggested an alternate one, which was like plan your goals for the morning, and then your limit is when you finish the goals, and then you can do whatever afterwards. And if it's 2 o'clock, great. If it's 7 o'clock, whatever. Um, but doing it repeatedly throughout the day, I sometimes do this in that I'll check whether, like, particularly if I'm like not feeling great or whatever else, or like tired type thing, um, I'll like consider and like weigh up the benefits of trying to like keep doing something or what type of break to take, because they sort of end up with different consequences. Yeah, but I've never done it explicitly. um, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that helps if you're tired or whatever is that if there's something like kind of a little hard that you think you should be doing but you're not, I think it helps if you just start, but you're willing to stop after a couple minutes if it's not going well. Like, you give yourself permission to abort and say, okay, I tried.
Yeah, yep,
And
I agree.
the easy start, easy stop helps versus just not trying, like, quite a bit.
Yeah. There's even like times like the other like a week or two ago, I had to do some like personal tax stuff that I've been putting off, and I thought it would be pretty quick. Um, and so I sort of did like this sort of or used this sort of strategy. Anyway, it ended up taking me 3 hours, but the fact that I'd like started and was able to like then concentrate on it a bit, meant that I like actually wanted to keep finishing it and get it done. So it was uh, yeah, in essence, I like got a lot more okay with it, even though it was still not particularly interesting. It was like collecting receipts and stuff that can be deducted. But yeah, so I agree that that's when I have used that strategy, it's been pretty good. I'm reasonably successful. Um,
Okay, anything else that uh you think didn't work that well, or that needs more work, like not like a good place to focus on to try to get better?
um, so I mean, I don't really feel like any of it has worked particularly. Like I think there's not much in this category essentially. Um, so that's sort of fine. In terms of stuff that I need more work on, I feel like there's a bunch of stuff that I want to do more work on. I don't know realistically how much more is worthwhile doing, um, like in tutorials versus just like general practice. Uh, like how much I actually need like guidance or things. I think over the longer term, it's going to make um, more sense to like end up talking about stuff like postmortems and things as opposed to more in detailed about stuff like when we've analyzed things that I've written. Um, but that's sort of like a long-term thing. Just in terms of future ideas, there was something. Uh, yeah. Um, I wanted to just discuss long-term schedule stuff again to make sure that we're on the same page. And now that we're, months,
Okay.
like 2 months advanced to the last time we talked about it. Yeah. So in general, I think everything's worked pretty well. That feels like there's things I might be missing because, I mean, I'm also sure that it could have been improved as well. Like there's things that we could learn, to either make future tutorial sessions better for myself or others, or also that, I've learned about myself or things. But I'm not exactly sure what they necessarily are. In terms of practice, so part of me is thinking about like the original goal of getting better at writing.
Uh-huh.
So I think I've made, significant progress in that respect. I'm not sure how, I guess, how easy it is to be for us to like actively work on that, or like how that sort of like balances now and going into the future, in the sense of like there should be a point where I like where, say, if I was doing lots of writing where we couldn't sustain like 6 hours of discussion a week on like issues or improvements that I had, like, presuming that I sort of like asymptote somewhere, um, where I'd need to like do more practice or stuff, or we need to like spend more time analyzing or whatever else to fill like that amount of time. Um, so in part, I don't think I'm there yet. So that sort of implies that there's stuff to do there. I'm not sure if it's just a matter of like doing a bunch more practice though, in that if I do a whole much more practice personally, then am I going to be able to like go through a problem of, or like a sort of process of self-improvement at a reasonable enough efficiency anyway at this point? I'm not quite sure. I'm definitely better at, I think I'd be much, much better at doing that now than I was. But yeah, I don't know, particularly we haven't really looked at, I mean, we sort of talked about a postmortem last week, but I haven't actually like properly done one. So that might be something that I should do. I was thinking actually about going back to, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but like going back to posts I made in like 2017 or things, and pulling out problems and doing postmortems of some of those. But they're sort of like bigger, harder postmortems to do as opposed to of recent stuff, which is easier to do. Yeah. Yeah. I think more practice will definitely bring to light problems that like haven't been brought up yet. Some of those problems might be sort of a bit like, I can see the potential of like things to come up that are like a bit superficial in terms of problems. In that, like, either that if I read it the next day, I might think of it myself and it's easy to fix, or stuff like that. So in terms of significant issues, I think I need to there's sort of two avenues that I need to do at the same time. One of them is like keeping practicing some of the simple stuff, because like there's still improvements that I need to make there. But that can be sort of fairly autonomous. And then taking on harder stuff as well, in that that'll sort of, I'll run into issues there, but I don't know what they are yet. Um, so this as well, I think, is like, in terms of, I mean, I know we've sort of been on the sort of like a general trajectory of this, but yeah, I feel like very specifically now, like I appreciate the idea that like being good at writing, thinking, and discussing are in essence all the same thing, and then there's like a little bit of other stuff around each one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yeah. Overall perspective, by the way, just because that's next on the list. I've been thinking a bit about this lately. I like uh, positive. Absolutely. I don't know of any other way that I would have been able to get from where I was to like roughly where I consider myself in the same period of time. There's a bunch of stuff that feels like very different. I think. I'm sort of it's like even over the past few months, it's felt like my ability to like compare how I feel about things now, compared to before, is like almost changing daily, sort of thing. Like it's very, very dynamic. It's been a really dynamic period. Um,
That's good.
yeah. Um, it's making me think about some of the stuff. Like, and I guess with I think it was Sia publishing or posting recently about
Oh yeah,
uh
what's that thread? Is it mean?
Um, yeah, so I've been thinking a lot more about this sort of stuff and my relationships with people in general, sort of going forward after this period, because they're going to be different in essence. And I think one thing that I don't have right now is a good idea of how, like, if I behaved the same way that I did 3 months ago, then I had like a lot of policies and behaviors and stuff and automatic like ways of dealing with a lot of common social situations. And I don't like those don't necessarily work anymore in that I have issues with them or parts of some of them type thing. So that's sort of something that I'm unsure about. I'm not really particularly worried. I don't think I'm going to miss out on anything worthwhile, but yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about. I've also been thinking about whether it's worth
So,
writing and if so, what, something to address this sort of stuff that C is bringing up.
oh yeah, like FI interest stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely welcome to give that a shot and see if you can help people. And it's a way to think about like what works for you and like remind yourself of things and get a perspective as well. Regarding what you were saying before, yeah, when you learn new things and change, then you find there are consequences and implications in other parts of your life. So it destabilizes things a bit, and you have to like work out the consequences. It's one of the reasons it's hard to change a huge amount really fast, because you have to work through the meanings of the changes as you go along.
Yep. Yep. Um, yeah, you end up with a lot of there's a lot of like just in time reevaluations of stuff that you've got to end up doing. Um, yeah, and the more you change, the more that happens, which I guess is sort of self-limiting in terms of rate of progress, but yeah, or self-dampening. Um, yeah, I should probably thinking about this. So I've thought for some time about doing something like this because I thought it was like a bit of an issue. There's a thing that I made. Where was it? It was some time ago, but like I've thought about or sort of been thinking about this for months. Yeah, so I made a tree back when we were doing stuff early on. So with some ideas that I changed now. So this is, yeah, last changed halfway through July, a month and a half ago, nearly 2 months ago, gosh. Yeah, and this, like an idea of like what are like sort of like a fallibleideas.com light sort of thing, like something that's more approachable for new members. So like written by I think I call them like transitioning members. Um,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, but it would be a thing where like people could like contribute to or things that is meant to not be as super high quality, but as a stepping stone. Anyway, yeah, but my thinking on it at the moment is that if I don't do this soon, then I'm going to end up being less good at doing it because I'll forget a bunch of stuff about what it was like 2 months ago.
Right,
So maybe
yeah.
that's a good thing to sort of focus on.
Yeah, there's definitely value in trying to write stuff down before you change too much and keep records of what actually happened. It's
Yeah.
my records of like early stuff are very old now, and no one seems to go look at them even though they're available. But I think there's something interesting about that. Because people ask about like how to get started, but they could look at like how I got started.
So I wonder how much people do or don't look at them. So I've a few times gone back and read some of your like much older stuff. One thing I do notice as well that I'm not sure about. So the short posts or the short codes, I think it's like mid 250s or something that they start working, and then before that they don't.
Um, so not all post IDs exist. That might be your problem. They're also
That's
not
what.
entirely in order.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I
Did you migrate
imported
to the
like
system?
4 blogs into this one.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of
So
sense.
the dates are in order, but the IDs aren't necessarily.
Yeah. One thing that I did find interesting is I'm not sure if this is what happens every time you go to like /blog. But like, yeah, if I put in like 100 there, then this doesn't give like the like these posts. I'm not sure if they're chronologically in order. Or sorry, like consecutive, but they're definitely not like new posts. Whether that's like blog as a category, for example.
Oh, I don't know what /blog is. This?
Yeah.
For some reason we're on page 3.
Oh, okay. Oh, there is
I
a
don't
page
know
thing down the bottom.
what the fuck. I
If
don't
I
know.
go to
Just don't
page
go to
2,
/blog. That's not where you're supposed to be.
oh, if I click on page 2, it still goes to page 3. It's like they're all page 3. It
Yeah,
looks like it's
I don't know what that's for, but if you just
that's
go
funny.
to regular, then I think it'll work. I'm on page 1, and then I can click page 2, page 3, and yeah, this is working. And then I can go to
So
page 126. I can find here's the oldest post, and it has a shortcode of 539.
one thing that's interesting, the
This one was
URL. So like
469.
um maybe there's some weird stuff going on with sorting. Um
I think I might have imported stuff in like reverse order,
yep.
just in terms of when the what IDs got created. Anyways, oh, anything that actually has a post, the shortcode should work.
Yeah, okay, cool. Um
Oh, here we
yeah,
go.
it's sort
Yeah,
of
here's post 5. 5 exists. It's the older it is, the more likely that I hid the post. Quite a while ago, I went through all the posts and hid some of them because they had dead links or personal stuff or other reasons. That was like probably over 10 years ago. But yeah, some of the really old posts aren't public.
that was
So
something that
that's why
I
there's missing IDs.
have wondered about was uh like I think having things in public is like good. Um but there are times that we change our mind on stuff, and don't think that when like that we need to disclose that we change our mind on like everything. Um sort of thing. Um I think it's okay to be like yeah, not to try and be like super perfect or something there. Uh
Yeah, the
anyway,
main
yeah.
things I removed were like really short posts with dead links. Like often just literally a link that doesn't work. Or
Oh, like if you
stuff
just
with
shared a
personal
website
info
kind
in
of
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
stuff with personal info, which I decided I should share less of. So it's not that I changed my mind about the content of the post. It's just yeah, I decided to have less personal stuff and more impersonal stuff, which is not a secret that I changed my mind about that.
Yep. No, and I think that's fair anyway, because the only reason we care about stuff being public is like accountability to ideas and things, which is not really a personal matter.
Yeah, anything that was actually about ideas is exactly the ones I tried to keep up.
Yep. All right, just thinking about what we were going over stuff earlier. So in terms of just what I need more practice on. So
But yeah, in terms of archives though, like you can go to the TCS archive and look at my initial post history and like see how I did discussions, which is a bit different than blogging. It also goes further back. Oh, it's curie.us/ebooks. That's just the old
okay.
website mirror.
Oh yeah, cool. These are the the
Yeah,
big
that
big
TCS
videos.
archive, we posted it through when I joined the list, basically. So it
Yep.
has my oldest public discussion posts because the IRC logs are not available. I actually have a lot of those, but that would probably not be a good idea to share because that was the chat room's like a lot more private than a list that has a literal
Yeah.
like formal feature for how to send anonymous posts to a specific address
Yeah.
and had instructions for how to download the archives.
I think as well, like your comments on the recent stuff about like if you like email someone like a stranger on the internet, you shouldn't expect it to be private. Which I agree with, by the way. I had to think about that. I wasn't sure I did originally, but I agree with pretty much everything there. In like 1999, the standards and expectations for stuff online was like really different. So I think it's okay for us to essentially say that different rules existed then, that and we shouldn't necessarily enforce the standards we have now. It's nice when we can, but yeah, I don't think there's particularly any issue with that. Yeah. Have you ever like discussed much or done like a long sort of, not necessarily long in terms of a post length, but duration wise, retrospective on like how you've changed or improvements you've made or things like that?
Not specifically, not really.
It is something I've like wondered about, and I noticed that like your YouTube videos are a decent way to expose oneself to that as well, particularly because some of them you discuss your methodology. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think like the posts somewhat speak for themselves. I think you can just see like my writing has improved a ton
yeah.
over
Um,
the last many years.
I actually feel like you've like improved over the last few years as well. Maybe not like in
Yeah.
like in nearly a
But
substantial way,
if you
but
go and read my like 2003 stuff, you'll see a bigger gap than if
yeah,
you
yeah.
read 2015 or something.
But yeah, I guess it shows the when you experiment with stuff as well. Which I get the feeling that there's been various times you've played with different ideas about things like that. But yeah, okay, so I
Okay,
think
yeah.
there's
So
other stuff.
there's a
Oh
question
yeah,
of what you want to do in sessions in the upcoming sessions in the near future. Like, are
yep.
there skills that you want to work on more, or are there philosophy topics you want to discuss more, or something else?
Yeah. So I guess broadly there are things in both categories. Um, I think I care most about still improving like writing and discussion. Discussion I value more than I used to as well. So sort of like including that more. I still want to work on that. I'm not yet happy with where I am and how, like, with some topics it takes me like a lot longer um, to write something about it. Yeah, so in general, I want to keep working on that. Um, I think one of the ways that we can, like with future sessions, that makes a lot of sense is having like bigger project sort of thing. Like in a lot of the early stuff that we did, that you've got down, there's a lot of foundational stuff, and everything is roughly speaking like fairly chunked up. There's only a few things that take more than like a few sessions to get through. Maybe like the grammar stuff was a bit longer, but um, But yeah, so I feel like one of the reasons that having like, you know, a discussion from your debate topic list might be good is because it sort of is one of these, like a bit of a longer project. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so either whether it's like projects that I'm doing, or like stuff that we do particularly for the tutorials, that's one sort of idea. I think there's a few things that sort of come to mind as potential sort of topics there, particularly related to like libraries of stuff that I want to sort of develop. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. In terms of like philosophy topics that I want to talk about, so there's I think there's still a bunch. I mean, I don't like I think I've got a decent grasp of uh sort of like, I guess I'll call it critical fallibilism to talk about like particularly the stuff that like from Popper up to yes no. I think I've got like a decent grasp of some of it, but there's still like big gaps in other parts, or potentially. I don't really know enough to know where those gaps would be. That's part of the problem. So like in general, I'd like to keep
Okay.
making progress in that direction. I feel like it's like really important. Um, it's yeah. So I don't want to ever like get complacent with regards to that, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, so we could go through some of that stuff.
Um, there's also, I mean, one of the other things that I'm sort of thinking about in some ways is like there's a lot of material that I could go over um, just like in my own time. Like I've got your video on, I think it was reading part of Objective Knowledge, or one of Popper's books.
Yeah.
I own a copy of Objective Knowledge. Um, I've been meaning to like reread BOI again. I mean, I haven't read Fabric, still. So like doing
Oh.
that, there's a lot of like that sort of stuff.
I'd go
Um,
with Fabric before rereading BOI.
yeah, yeah. I've read the first few chapters before. Some of it felt like really similar to BOI, but there's obviously a bunch of stuff that's either more detailed than BOI or different. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So thinking about this is sort of feels related to whether we have a midweek session as well. Um, in terms of like yeah, there's a yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so we could definitely go over some philosophy topics like paths forward or something without homework if you want to do that.
That actually might
Or
be. Oh yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead. I was just
I
gonna say,
was gonna say.
or we could give you
Yeah.
more time to practice stuff and have more like writing to analyze or something.
Yeah, I mean, they work both pretty well together. So that if we plan to do something like that, where we go over, say, paths forward and related material midweek, then any writing I do between now and Friday is sort of like good regardless. There's less pressure for Wednesday. Oh, that was one thing that maybe didn't work as well as could have. I'm not sure if this is just like to do with my attitude or whether there's actually like structural changes that could improve it. Um, uh, like sometimes it's not consistent, but sometimes I've sort of felt like a little bit under pressure in the like more so than I necessarily want to be. Some of that's been good though, in that like sort of like the stuff we were talking about getting better at doing things when you don't necessarily want to, or you're not in optimal condition. Um, so that's I don't know. Maybe it's a thing to mention at least.
Yeah, the stuff about pressure being partly good, I think, is important, and that like old TCS stuff doesn't deal with that well, or like fun criterion, um, where they just sort of say like only do what you're super into, and if you're like partly rational and partly conventional, that doesn't actually work that well. It'll lead to problems because the conventional part of you like sort of requires some of the conventional motivations and incentive structures and so on. and isn't designed to work around only follow the fun ever and nothing else. But on the other hand, like forcing yourself to do stuff you hate, like certainly has downsides. You have to be careful about like too much pressure and stuff.
Yeah. I think so yeah, people often I think see this sort of stuff on a single spectrum as opposed to like it's more nuanced than that, I think. In the same way that like people do exercise and it's not necessarily like pleasurable. They look, if they go really hard, they look like they're about to like have a heart attack. Um, but they feel good about it afterwards. Um, Similarly, like if you have a conflict between like something that you think rationally and something like conventionally, I'm not sure whether that's ever fun to work through. Um, like it's important to, but there's a reason that we have like evasive tendencies by default, or seemingly by default, and it's part of like solving those conflicts aren't fun. Um, so yeah, I think there's like benefits to fun criterion type stuff in that, like you're going to be most productive working on stuff that you care about and you've like got a passion for and things. Um, and on the other hand, like being overly disciplined and like practicing like willpower above all else and stuff, like you can have a really bad life that way. um but there's some sort of middle ground that makes a lot more sense. That's I think it's sort of deeper than uh there's like, yeah, long-term good feelings that don't come under like fun or hedonism, I guess. Hmm.
I had a thought, just a second. There's one other thought. I need to write them both down before I forgot. But... Oh, okay. So trying to do like fun things, or like switch to that kind of lifestyle. People totally underestimate how hard it is to do like any alternative lifestyle in general. Because whenever you're not doing the traditional thing, you have to reinvent or recreate a bunch of stuff. And it's just like way harder than people seem to think it is.
Mhm.
They look at
um
the tradition and they find some flaws and they say, "Ooh, I see flaws. I'm smarter than the tradition. All I have to do is fix the flaws and I can do better." And it's kind of like rewriting a code base because you saw 7 bugs and you're like, "Well, I found 7 bugs. I'm smarter than this code base."
yeah. And 3 years later, Java 1.0 gets released. It reminds me of the way people think about schooling and problems with schooling. Is like if we just solve this or like whatever else. And I mean, as far as I know, there's no like really good competitive model for schooling that like works consistently like better by an order of magnitude. We have some things that are better, but we've got huge variance in our existing schooling system. So I don't think that we've really got an example of something that's like overwhelmingly better. Um,
There are
but
claims
yeah,
that direct instruction has performed like much better on in various research. I've looked into it a little bit, and I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it enough to tell.
um, it doesn't like these words don't
Yeah, ignore
seem
the
intuitively
name.
great. Yeah, okay, cool.
No, I watched a couple videos of the guy who originated it doing teaching, and I thought he was okay. It's not like it's terrible or anything. And I could see that it was plausible that it would work well in general. I saw regular teachers doing it with not all that much training, and it gives them a lot of guidance so that the individual teachers have less variance in doing their own thing. Like they actually follow the stuff that the good teacher wrote down for them to do rather than winging it. And this improves results and consistency and so on. So I found it like decently plausible but to look into.
Yeah, okay. Um, Interesting. Um, yeah, okay. Um, all right. So for
Okay,
your
so
thoughts, where were we
the
at?
other thing about follow your interests or follow the fun is people's interests and what they find fun is determined by convention and their irrational crap. It's not like that's some pure rational part of themselves. They like a bunch of stuff for bad reasons, and they don't have great control over what they like. So it's not actually a good criterion of guidance. Like maybe it's a good criterion when you're age 1 or 2, but you get older and you get polluted, and then whatever you like is might be good, might be pollution. It still has some importance and value. You can't just ignore what you like, but you can't trust it or something either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm not sure how fair it is to say this actually, but like uh I'm not sure if there's been much written or published on fun criterion stuff besides Lillian Deutsch's video. Um I should probably put Deutsch first. It's on his
I've
channel.
had conversations with them about it, but yeah, they haven't actually written much down, partly because if they did, it would be very easy to criticize, or it would have a lot of caveats. Because whenever I talked with David about it, he put tons of qualifiers on it, and it basically doesn't mean what it sounds like at all when he told it to me. So it's
Yeah.
extremely misleading, and I don't know why they made that video.
I get the feeling that one of the I think early on in the video, Lulu says something like there's like an epistemic quality to it, um, or it seems like David's making a epistemic um, sort of claim as opposed to something asinine. Um, if you restrict there's a problem with doing it this way, but if you restrict the audience to like people who have, for example, like read BOI, I think it's much more applicable as like people in general are not going, there's going to be like a whole class of stuff that people aren't interested in, essentially. So in general, it sort of works out better. One of the problems with doing that is that if those people, like the broader audience that I just described, if they go and tell other people about it and they don't have the skills in thinking that like Deutsch did beforehand, thinking about that, then now it's just the same as applying the advice generally. Um,
Yeah, I
so
don't
it's sort
agree
of
with
like
that. I don't think it's suitable for the BOI audience. When David told it to me personally, like years ago, my recollection is basically he said most times people think they're having fun, it's not real fun and doesn't count.
yeah, okay, that's like I mean, yeah.
So then to say follow your fun is misleading if that's what you actually think, is that most of the time they're just not having fun,
Now it's
even when they
like,
say they
yeah,
are.
redefining fun in terms of something else. Like
Yeah.
it only counts as fun if you're good at thinking, or then your fun is real fun or something, which is obviously problematic. But
Like, I think you
yeah,
can make arguments along those lines and they're okay. I just don't think you should combine them with a follow the fun criterion, or that's just confusing. But like, there's stuff about that in Atlas Shrugged where it questions people's desires and what they want, and it says a lot of what they do, like sleeping with some woman or getting drunk or going to the movie theater, is what they do to escape from desires and their actual goals, rather than being something they actually like.
mm. So that seems like it's more that's sort of like a better in terms of questions like is there such thing as real fun? I mean, that sounds like a way to actually think about that in a meaningful sense. Um,
Yeah, there's a good topic there. It's just a separate issue than this fun criterion thing, or I mean, at least it wasn't presented along with it, so that's a problem.
yeah. I sort of feel like as well, in some ways, it feels like the fun criterion, a bit of like icing on the cake as such. Like it's a thing that might work well if you've thought lots about your own morality, you've thought about like your actions in life, you're aligning your actions and your morality and like epistemic stuff, and you're like actively thinking about things and solving problems and making progress and stuff like that. Like in that case, something like the fun criterion, I think makes like in the restricted case, it's easier to argue for. Um, however, it's icing on the cake in the sense that it doesn't really matter much at that point because all of the like meat is, or the cake part, um, is already in that stuff beforehand, in the actual like alignment of your values and behavior, um, and then you end up with a better life anyway. So it's not that uh, it's in some ways maybe it's like you can trust your sense of fun more to be something valuable when you've done all that work before that, the alignment.
Yeah. More about how it's misleading, by the way. David is not a role model. People don't know what his life is like or what his personality is like or all that. Like you can't be like David says fun, I'll be like David. Like it's not gonna work. You don't have enough information. And as far as Luli, she's really quite bad at it. So she provides more information, but do not. It's dishonest of her to present it like she has these great ideas and understands them when she actually can't do them in her life.
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, one of the ways I was thinking about Deutsch when you were just speaking there was like I have no idea what he does on the weekends. One of the only personal things I know about him is that he liked House, like the TV show.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, um, yeah, you're quite similar in that regard in that I don't know much about. So you're a bit more public in some things like gaming and things, but there's a lot of other stuff
Yeah.
that, yeah, um, it's sort of interesting. Yeah. Um, anyway, yeah. So
Okay, so do you want to keep the next session or not?
I guess in some ways the question is how useful is it going to be? What do we get? What would we do? Like this
So
session made sort of sense. Yep.
yeah, we could talk about paths forward or something like that. I think that
Oh
was the
yeah, that was
best
the idea.
idea we came up with.
I'd actually really appreciate that. It's something that I've been
Okay.
meaning to like go through in more detail. I also think it might be useful, sort of A as a general resource, but also there seems to be some topical stuff about it in FI, so it would be good to do.
Okay.
Cool. Yep. So let's keep Wednesday or Tuesday for you. Cover parts forward stuff and then do Friday or end of the week. That feels pretty good.
Okay,
Um,
so then for Friday, you'll try to have written something to get feedback
y-
on, do you think?
yeah, that's probably a good thing to sort of aim for. I've, I mean, well, one thing actually that might be sort of good. We haven't really analyzed any of the discussion in the LessWrong stuff. If there's any like substantial or wherever the post was,
Yeah, I've
if
skimmed all of that. I don't think going into a lot of detail on it would be super valuable, but we could do some
yeah, good.
overview of it quickly, maybe.
I wouldn't mind like
Or if you
reviewing
have
the extent
specific
of.
questions.
Yeah, if there's like specific issues that come up, then that might be good. Otherwise, I'll try and write some stuff so we can review it. I've been doing a bit of writing that I haven't made public, and other stuff. So yeah, that sounds good. Pass forward Wednesday, writing Friday. One thing that I don't think we covered just in the which might be worth covering in the last few minutes.
Okay.
Where was it? Yeah, so long-term schedule. So
Oh, yeah.
I've been meaning to go back to whenever we talked about it, like first or second or third week or something. But I haven't gone back and done that. My memory of it is roughly that it would sort of like exponentially decrease. Um, so that we're at like the first or getting close to the first step now. So maybe, yeah, like if this week we have 3 sessions, maybe next week, like start doing 2 sessions, and sort of play it by ear from there. And then my impression of what we sort of discussed as a way to go forward from that was sort of to like making them like increasingly infrequent, but keeping them sort of going, potentially at like a rate of like once a month or something like that. Um, yeah. So I think that's from memory what I had in mind.
Okay, that sounds okay. That's not how I remember it. My
Okay.
understanding was you were expecting for work to start in like an abrupt way where you become busy all of a sudden at some point, and so we'd have like an abrupt drop off and just sort of do the tutoring until the work starts and then stop immediately and slow it way down to like monthly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I
But
think
if exponential, if a decay over time works better, we could do that.
so I think a decay is probably better in general anyway, in that like having more sessions sort of earlier on in the work period is going to be more beneficial. I maybe I just sort of didn't mention it. I always imagine like a bit of a transition period, like 3 or 4 weeks or something, um, where yeah, so I've got like hints that things would start, and then over that 3 or 4 week period, that would be like a scaling down. Not that we'd necessarily go straight to once a month after that, but though that was always an option. But yeah. Anyway, I might have a think and just about what things are going to work well schedule-wise. We can talk about that next time. But the main thing I wanted to talk about that for was to just cover that, like the long-term continuing thing. Like that, I think is going to be pretty important. I would like that resource essentially.
Okay, yeah, that should work fine for me.
Cool. All right. I don't have anything else particularly to talk about then. I guess should we leave it there?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if there's anything else I had to say.
Sure thing. Oh, objectivism might be a thing that I wouldn't mind covering a bit at some stage.
Oh yeah, so you've read Fountainhead, anything else?
A little bit of Virtue of Selfishness, and otherwise just general stuff, but I haven't read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, that's a good example of how having like lower value reading time, more careless reading, is way better than nothing. Like if you'd read all of those books once quickly, that'd be a big advantage compared to the current situation.
Yeah, okay, yep. I don't think there's any urgency for me to learn more about Oism, by the way, but it is something that I'd like to do over the long term.
Yeah, it doesn't have like special immediate urgency. It's pretty important ideas though for how to think about life, and it has stuff about morality and self-interest and like self-directed living with like your own motor instead of doing what other people want, and politics and political philosophy and economics.
Yeah, if there is actually anything that's urgent out of it, my intuition is more about the political stuff. I have sort of, I'm not sure if this is like a mistake. I feel like I'm fairly aligned with a lot of those ideas in general. Like for a long time, I thought like that there has to be some objective morality. So the second-handedness stuff I've like thought about a bunch over the past few years.
Yeah, that's in Fountainhead the most anyways. Atlas Shrugged is a little more political and economic of a book.
Yeah.
Whereas Fountainhead is sort of like how to live like Rourke in a way. Like he's the best role model out of all her characters, I think.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough. But that is why like Atlas Shrugged is certainly something that I'm intending to read, particularly because I know you've said that it's more about the political stuff, like how governments should work and run and stuff like that.
It's a much bigger picture story about like it has the government, it has businessmen, it has like events going on in the whole country with a transcontinental railroad, instead of just like a few people in mostly one city.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Unless you've got anything else, I feel like that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, okay. So see you in 2 days.
Yep, sounds good. See you then.
Bye.